He was one of the most talented scorers of his generation, and yet his career-defining play was a rebound.
Back out to Allen, his three-pointer, bang!
Chris Bosh was averaging 24 points per game before he joined the Miami Heat, where he willingly became a third option behind LeBron and D-Wade. His selfless act made him an even better player, won him 2 NBA championships, and in the process, Bosh redefined the center position forever.
Chris was that start of that evolution of that face big, that stretch big. He showed everyone there was a different level of big coming to the game.
In today's NBA, it's expected for big men to be able to defend multiple positions and shoot from 3. But the first guy who did it effectively was Bosh.
Very agile. The fact that he was left-handed shooting threes, taking you off the dribble, it made it very difficult.
Chris was an all-star in 11 of his 13 NBA seasons, and there are only 28 other players with more all-star appearances than CB. However, because he never won a championship without LeBron, some view Chris Bosh as a glorified role player on championship teams. For others, including Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Bosh is one of the most underrated players of all time.
Chris Bosh will go down in the history of the Miami Heat as one of the greatest big men that we've ever had.
So, how good was Chris Bosh actually? Bosh grew up in a humble family setting in the suburbs of Dallas, Texas, sharing a bed with his little brother until he was 6.
We hovered right there on the poverty line, lower middle class. But I was lucky. I was one of my only friends who had both parents in the house. We didn't have much, but we always had something to eat.
Growing up, Chris couldn't be seen in expensive clothes. He was only dreaming of wearing Jordans, and early on, he was taught the value of hard work. He dabbled in football and baseball, but his true passion became basketball, and Chris literally became obsessed.
Anything that was basketball, I consumed it. If they said eat something for breakfast, I'm eating it for breakfast every day. If they slept with their basketball, but I tried it.
He started playing when he was 4 years old, and when he was in the 8th grade, he was already 6 feet tall. But despite his size, Chris was never the star of any of his youth teams, and was the second option on his high school squad. The way his alma mater, Georgia Tech, found out about Bosh was different from 99.9% of other high school prospects. Colleges usually scout players due to their dominance on the court, but Georgia Tech found Chris due to his dominance in the classroom. Chris was a good basketball player, but he was an even better student, being a member of the National Honor Society and several student engineering organizations.
We always had to have good grades. Basketball was great, but unless you brought home what you were supposed to bring home, you couldn't go outside and play. We couldn't have our video games, and we couldn't play basketball.
We found out about him when he was a high school sophomore because he was a great student. Georgia Tech is a tough school academically, and we heard he was interested in computer graphics and computer science. That's how we started recruiting him, Coach Paul Hewitt from Georgia Tech. However, during the summer before his junior year, Bosh sprouted to his current height of 6'11", and he became a problem. I was fast, that was my thing. I was skinny, but you couldn't catch me. I would run down the court, get dunks, get blocks, plus I'm handling the ball, I'm pushing the ball, I'm shooting the 3. Just basically getting mine on demand. I could do whatever I wanted. Bosh went from being unranked as a sophomore to a highly recruited prospect as a junior, and he got an invite to the prestigious ABCD camp in 2001, where he played against his future teammate LeBron James.
I guess I just was successful over one summer and one school year, and that was good enough to get me invited there.
But Chris was always a thoughtful, modest kid, and unlike LeBron, he didn't view himself as the chosen one. And that proved to be a blessing in disguise, because it taught Bosh the importance of sacrificing individuality for the greater good of the team. Even though he had NBA potential, Bosh was more concerned with defending, blocking shots, rebounding, running the floor, and doing all the things you'd expect a role player to do, said his high school coach. He was even doing scouting reports for his opponents on the internet back in 2001, when most people barely knew how to use the computer, and it all paid off. Bosh's preparation and unselfish play helped Lincoln High School to achieve a perfect 40-0 record in his senior season.
We knew what we were capable of, but not that we were underestimating ourselves, but we didn't think we'd be the number 1 team in the nation at the end. We just wanted to win.
Winning the state finals against Kendrick Perkins in a game where Bosh recorded 23 points, 17 rebounds, and 9 blocks. Bosh was subsequently named High School Player of the Year by Basketball America, a first-team All-American, and Texas Mr. Basketball by the Association of Basketball Coaches. He had plenty of college offers, but he stayed loyal to the college that recruited him first, Georgia Tech.
I wanted to play in the ACC because I felt it gave me a better chance to make it to the league. I'll go to Georgia Tech. They don't have, there's a void at the 4 that they need to fill.
With the Yellow Jackets, Bosh immediately became the most important piece on the team, leading them with 15.6 points, 9 rebounds, and 2.2 blocks. CB also led the ACC in field goal percentage and blocks per game, and was the third in the entire NCAA in three-point percentage, hitting 48% of his threes. Even though his initial intention was to finish college, due to his strong play, Bosh elected to put his name in the loaded 2003 NBA draft, where he was drafted 4th overall by the Toronto Raptors.
With the 4th pick in the 2003 NBA draft, the Toronto Raptors select Chris Bosh from Georgia Tech University.
The Raptors had Vince Carter, Jalen Rose, and Donyell Marshall, but despite adding a talented prospect like Bosh to a veteran core, the Raptors struggled and were miles away from making the playoffs. Because their starting center, Antonio Davis, got traded earlier in the season, Bosh was forced to play the 5, which wasn't his natural position due to his thin 235-pound frame.
I'm the type of player who, whatever it takes to win and whatever the coaches need me to do, that's the role I fulfill, and I work as hard as I can to be as best as I can.
However, he wasn't backing down from a challenge, and despite small injuries and bruises from battling guys like Shaq and Yao Ming, Bosh persevered and played in 75 games, which earned him praise from the entire organization.
On the court, you gotta learn a lot of things real fast. How to play certain people, how to box out properly, stuff like that, because, these old guys, they'll take advantage of you if you don't know.
As a rookie, he averaged 11.5 points, 7.4 rebounds, and 1.4 blocks in 33 minutes per game, leading all rookies in rebounding and blocks, and setting a franchise record for most rebounds in a rookie season. The 2004-2005 season will forever be remembered by the Vince Carter saga, as the disgruntled superstar barely gave any effort until he was finally traded. Following Carter's departure, Bosh averaged 18.4 points, 9.5 rebounds, and 1.6 blocks, improving in every major statistical category. But the Raptors missed the playoffs once again. But in the 2005-06 season, there was no more denying Bosh and his rise to superstardom. He averaged 22.5 points and 9.2 rebounds per game, shooting north of 50% from the field and 80% from the free throw line. He was too quick for opposing power forwards, and if he wasn't beating them off the dribble, he was shooting over them with a perfect blend of speed and skill. Chris made his first All-Star team, but because the Vince Carter trade yielded so little in return, the Raptors were even worse than before, winning just 27 games.
It was killing me, man. It doesn't matter how hard you play, you're still on the losing end. That's a bad feeling.
And when Bosh got injured late in the season, Toronto lost 10 of the 11 games he missed, which highlighted his importance to the team. However, after the season ended, Lady Luck smiled at Toronto because they got the #1 pick in the 2006 draft, which they used on big man Andrea Bargnani, selecting the Italian before LaMarcus Aldridge and Brandon Roy. But despite Bargnani providing minimal defense, he was decent enough offensively. And thanks to another leap from Bosh, the Raptors were finally winning games. Chris averaged 22.6 points and 10.7 rebounds per game, finishing 7th in voting for MVP, and he made the second All-NBA team.
He was competing against the best every night, and he was showing that he was that caliber of player.
The Raptors finished the season with 47 wins, which tied the franchise record, and secured a playoff berth, where they matched up against the now-hated Vince Carter and his New Jersey Nets.
I was excited, but then again, I told you the fear of the unknown. I was excited, but then it was like, we finally gonna make the playoffs. Well, how's the playoffs?
Toronto's inexperience was evident as they struggled offensively throughout Game 1 and eventually lost 96-91. But they bounced back in Game 2, as Bosh recorded 25 points and a game-high 13 rebounds. However, the Nets were too deep and much more seasoned than the Raptors, eventually winning the series in 6 games. For the 2008 season, Bosh was dealing with minor injuries and missed 15 games. But he still averaged his usual 22 points and made the All-Star team. Toronto finished as the 6th seed and faced the Orlando Magic in the first round of the playoffs, where Bosh had to square off against the most dominant big man in the NBA, Dwight Howard. And even though Bosh led all scorers in the series with 24 points, Dwight dominated, leading the Magic to a 4-1 series victory. It was clear that Bosh needed help from both a scoring and rebounding standpoint, and the Raptors tried to provide that by trading for six-time All-Star Jermaine O'Neal.
My decision on going with the Toronto Raptors was more based off guys like Chris Bosh and the character that I know that they have that's very selfless.
But before that season started, Bosh played on the Redeem team at the Beijing Olympics, helping Team USA get the gold medal with 9 points and a team-leading 6 rebounds per game. But when the NBA season started, wins weren't easy to come by for Bosh and the Raptors. Chris was averaging 22 and 10, he made another All-Star team, and was one of only 2 players in the NBA averaging 20 points and 10 rebounds. But it was clear that the Jermaine O'Neal experiment wasn't working, and he was soon traded for Shawn Marion. After the Raptors won just 33 games and missed the playoffs, Toronto offered Bosh a max extension, but Bosh declined, wanting to become a free agent in 2010. To prepare for the 2009-10 season, Bosh spent the entire summer in the gym, adding 20 pounds to his frame, which brought his weight up to 250 pounds, in order to help him battle stronger NBA centers in the paint. And that extra muscle paid off. Bosh averaged a career-high 24 points and 10.8 rebounds per game, shooting 52% from the field, which was another career high. On the other hand, carrying that extra weight proved to be a burden on his knees, which would often swell up after games. Bosh was forced to miss several weeks of action after the All-Star break, during which the Raptors fell from the 5th seed to 9th. In the last week of the season, Toronto still had a chance to make the playoffs if they won against the Bulls. But with Bosh out of the lineup, the Bulls blew them out and the Raptors' season was over. This game was a microcosm of Bosh's 7-year stint in Toronto. With him, they were just good enough to make the playoffs, but without him, they were a mess. And it was clear that he needed a change of scenery. Toronto, New York, Chicago, and Miami all tried to persuade Bosh to sign with them in the offseason, and Chris was strongly considering signing with the Bulls.
Chicago, they made a very, very strong offer. That's a championship team right there.
But then he took a meeting with Pat Riley, who did something that only the Miami team president can do.
He took out this velvet bag full of championship rings and dumped them all across the table. He picked one up, and he looked me dead in my eye and he said, "You give it back to me when we win one together."
A few weeks later, Bosh and LeBron signed with the Heat. And what followed was the most famous player introduction in NBA history.
Can you feel it? South Florida is electric, knowing the Miami Heat has now secured 3 of the NBA's biggest names to play right here next season.
But we also know you 3 kings came down here to win championships. Not 1,
not 2, not 3, not 4, not 5, not 6, not 7.
But when the season started, it was clear that incorporating 3 stars was easier said than done. The Heat started the season 9-8, with Bosh, LeBron, and D-Wade still trying to figure out when to shoot and when to pass.
It was a disconnect in our team. You could sit on the floor.
However, the Heat's form picked up from there, and they finished the season with 58 wins, with Bosh averaging 18.7 points per game and notching his 6th straight All-Star appearance. Miami easily got past Philadelphia and Boston in the first 2 rounds, but the first-seeded Bulls with the MVP Derrick Rose were supposed to be a much tougher matchup. But Bosh shot the lights out in that series, averaging 23 points on 60% shooting from the field, and Miami advanced to the finals after 5 games. In the championship series against Dallas, Bosh wasn't playing particularly well in the first 2 games, shooting below 30%. But in Game 3, CB made the game-winning shot that put Miami up 2-1 in the series. Unfortunately for Bosh and Miami, they wouldn't win another game, as Dirk played a phenomenal series and brought the first title to Dallas. Bosh averaged 18.5 points and 7.3 rebounds and was the 3rd leading scorer in the finals behind Nowitzki and Wade. But it simply wasn't enough, and he ended the finals in tears.
It was embarrassing. It was hard. We were shameful.
For the 2012 season, Miami's coach Eric Spoelstra started experimenting with small ball lineups, using Bosh at the center position.
But Chris Bosh had to go to the 5. And CB being who he is, there was no pushback.
Bosh averaged 18 points and 8 rebounds in the regular season and made another All-Star team. But Miami's title hopes were nearly dashed when Chris injured his abdominal muscles in the first game of the conference semifinals against Indiana. However, LeBron and Wade were able to handle the Pacers on their own, winning the series in 6 games. But in the conference finals against Boston, they needed Bosh. He returned in Game 5 of that series, but only played 14 minutes, and Boston won the game, taking a 3-2 lead. In Game 6, LeBron played the best game of his life, dominating the Celtics with 45 points and 15 rebounds, forcing a Game 7. And then, in the deciding game, Bosh shined, hitting 8 of his 10 shots, including 3 threes, and scoring 19 points off the bench to propel the Heat to victory and another NBA Finals appearance. In the finals against OKC, Bosh played exclusively at the center, and his shooting prowess forced opposing big men to step to the three-point line and guard him. This opened up driving lanes for LeBron and D-Wade, who had fewer bodies in the paint when attacking the basket.
And now Bosh is in a strong corner. Are you going to leave him or not? If you do, he's going to tag you.
With Bosh, Miami had a center who could dribble, pass, and shoot, but also a guy who was mobile enough to guard other forwards and strong enough to battle traditional big men in the post.
And CB could pass, he could rebound and push. There wasn't many fives at that time that was rebounding and pushing the break.
Bosh was a unique blend of size, length, speed, and shooting ability. And with him at center, the Heat were able to play with 5 shooters on the floor, which was revolutionary. Even though he averaged just 14.6 points and 9.2 rebounds in the finals, Bosh was instrumental for Miami, hitting 40% of his three-pointers and providing a constant threat from the outside that had to be addressed. But because Bosh was also a good rebounder, they didn't suffer on that end, out-rebounding OKC in the series and winning the championship in 5 games.
It's such a great feeling just to be in this position and happy.
Congratulations to the 2012 NBA champion, your Miami Heat.
Even though the focus was on LeBron, who deservedly got the most praise and was the finals MVP, moving Bosh to center and the threat of his outside shooting is what made the biggest difference. After the season, Spoelstra realized that small ball was the way to go, and he told Bosh that he'd exclusively play center in the future. And for that reason, Chris decided to bulk up again. But this time it was only 10 pounds, with more emphasis on his legs rather than the upper body that he bulked up in his last season in Toronto. So this time around, Bosh got stronger without the swelling in his knees. And for the 2013 season, CB shot 54% from the field, a career high. And even though he didn't shoot a ton of threes, the threat of his shot was always present. And that's what mattered the most. On top of his offense, Bosh played the best defense of his life, and his all-around impact was felt far beyond the raw numbers. Miami won a franchise record 66 games, including a late-season win against San Antonio, where Miami decided to rest LeBron and Wade, and Bosh hit a game winner in the final seconds. In the first 2 rounds of the playoffs, Miami lost just 1 game, with Chris shooting over 50% from the field and 44% from 3. In the conference finals, the Indiana Pacers proved to be a much tougher opponent, pushing the series to 7 games. But Miami was now too seasoned and too good not to make the finals, and they blew out the Pacers in Game 7, advancing to their 3rd consecutive NBA Finals, this time against the San Antonio Spurs. The Heat and the Spurs split the first 2 games before the Spurs blew out Miami in Game 3 to take a 2-1 series lead. In Game 4, Bosh recorded 20 points and 13 rebounds. Wade had 32 points, and LeBron scored 33 to even the series. But San Antonio bounced back in Game 5 at home and was 1 win away from the title. Game 6 was played in Miami, and it was an instant classic. The Spurs held the lead throughout the game, with an 11-point advantage going into the 4th quarter. And even though the Heat erased that deficit, the Spurs answered with a run of their own, holding a 5-point lead with less than 30 seconds to go. The NBA personnel already started bringing up the championship trophy and preparing for the Spurs celebration. But then, LeBron hit a 3 that cut the lead to 2 points. After Kawhi made just 1 of his 2 free throws, Miami had a chance to tie the game with a 3. And what happened next was a career-defining moment for everyone involved.
Rebound Bosh. Back out to Allen. His three-pointer. Bang! Tie game with 5 seconds remaining.
Only thing I heard, CB. I didn't hear anything else.
In the overtime, Miami had a 3-point lead with seconds to go, and San Antonio had a chance to tie the game with a 3-pointer. But Bosh came through once again, blocking Danny Green's attempt to secure the victory. In Game 7, Bosh got into foul trouble and missed all 5 of his shots. But despite being scoreless, he was still a factor on defense and on the boards. And thanks to a monster game from LeBron, Miami won back-to-back titles.
2013 NBA champion, the back-to-back Miami Heat champions.
We all knew we was making sacrifices, but we knew what we all came together for, and that was to win championships, and that's what we did.
For the 2014 season, Bosh and the Heat took their foot off the gas in the regular season, and Chris averaged just 16.2 points and 6.6 rebounds, which were the lowest numbers since his rookie season. Still, he made the All-Star team, he hit another game-winning three-pointer against Portland, and Miami made another NBA Finals, once more against the Spurs. But this time, the Spurs had the antidote for Miami's aggressive trapping defense, which they completely dismantled with quick ball movement, cutting, and having multiple shooters on the floor. Even though Miami didn't have a bad series offensively, with Bosh himself shooting 55% from the field and 39% for three, the Heatles looked helpless on defense, and they simply couldn't stop the Spurs' ball movement.
We just weren't ready. They were better than us.
San Antonio won the series in 5 games, and after 4 NBA Finals and 2 titles, LeBron decided to move back to Cleveland. It's hard to lose the best player in the world. But without James, Wade and Bosh picked up the scoring, and Chris was looking more like that player from Toronto, averaging 21 points and 7 rebounds per game. Unfortunately, his season was cut short due to blood clots in his lungs.
A Miami Heat star sidelined, Chris Bosh out for the rest of the season after the Heat confirms he does have blood clots on his lung.
He's in good spirits. He's amazing. He really is.
When he went to the hospital, the biggest thing for all of us as his teammates is, we just wanted the best for him.
In 2016, Chris returned and played to his usual standard, averaging 19 points and 7.5 rebounds. But then, a disaster.
My initial thoughts from it were just like, first of all, you have to be kidding. Secondly, this isn't real.
Chris Bosh's journey back to the court took its biggest hit today when once again a recurrence of blood clots will keep him on the sidelines for the foreseen future.
Another blood clot was found in his leg, and he was forced to sit out another year. And that year turned into forever. Even though Bosh wanted to come back in 2017, the Heat medical staff advised against it due to reappearing blood clots.
The Miami Heat regret that it remains unable to clear Chris to return to basketball activities, and there's no timetable for his return.
Which turned out to be a career-ending illness for Chris, who was forced to retire at the age of 32, while he was still in his prime. At the time of his retirement, Bosh was among the 100 best scorers and 100 best rebounders of all time, despite his career being cut short. From his childhood, he was always a team-first guy who only wanted to win and didn't care about the numbers. If he did, he would have stayed in Toronto, where he could have easily averaged more than 20 points for his entire career. If he played in the NBA today, his skill set would be even more valuable due to his finesse game and ability to defend multiple positions. Bosh is one of the best players ever at the power forward position, and he was one of the catalysts for the three-point revolution, which changed the game forever.
Legends aren't defined by their successes. They're defined by how they bounce back from their failures.
Thanks for watching. And if you like this video, we have another one for you right here.